Welcome to today's economics lesson. My name is Mr. Berry. This lesson is brought to you by the Northern Cape Department of Education in collaboration with Pagama Research and Development. Good day again, grade 12. Welcome. Today's lesson, we are still looking at the revision program on your paper 2. Today, we are going to focus on both microeconomics and economic issues. At the end of the lesson, learners will be able to answer prelim paper 2 on section B. So what we're going to do today, we are going to look at section B questions from November 2020 paper 2. Right, so your paper 2, reminder again, it is 150 marks out of it's out of 150 for 2 hours. That is your duration. Then you are having two main topics. The first topic is your microeconomics. The next topic is economic issues. Subtopics of microeconomics, you must know perfect competition, everything under perfect competition on your examination guideline, from understanding the description of perfect competition to the characteristics to the graphs that you are having in a short run and a long run graph, and also which that is your profit not profit, I mean your equilibrium position graphs. You have your long run normal profit graph, you have your shutdown graph, and then you have the competition policies. You need to understand everything on imperfect competition around that. Imperfect competition, you must understand that we have 3 markets here, and then know the difference between the 3 markets in the imperfect market. And then you have market freedom. You must understand why we say market are failing, what are the causes and what are the consequences of market failing. Then there is subtopics on economic issues, your inflation. You must understand the causes, the types, ways to measure it. You must understand the consequences and then ways to combat inflation. Also, there's tourism. You must know the benefit and effects of tourism. And then environmental sustainability. You must understand the concept of the state of the environment. You must understand government involvement, markets involvement on the environment sustainability, and international problems and international measures to solve environmental sustainability. So you need for you to be well prepared for your examination. Remember, when we are using question papers, we are using example questions that you may have, but then the best tool is using the examination guideline and understanding everything that you find in the examination guideline that they say you must know. You must make sure that you master everything that is there. Right, so our pre-knowledge, you have already done microeconomics in the classroom. That one included the perfect, imperfect, and market failure. You've done economic issues. It included inflation, tourism, and environmental sustainability. Right, so we are going straight to our section B questions to respond to the section B questions from the November 2020 question paper. So we are going to do question 2 from 2.1 to 2.5, right? So as a reminder, we've looked at how you can score when it comes to your section B, that you have your 2.1.1, that is 2 mark lower order respond. And then on your data respond question, I always mention this, that the first 3 questions, which is 4 marks, it's a question of number 1 where you are listing, number 2 where you are naming, and then number 3 where you are describing. There's 4 marks there. So that is a free 4 marks. And for every question in section B, it has 2 data respond questions. So that is 4 plus 4 for the data respond plus 2 mark of this first question, that makes it 10. And then the 2.4 or 3.4 or 4.4 again is the a middle order question where you just need to remember what you learned in the classroom and in your textbook. There's no need for you to think critically for the 0.4 question, then it's 18 marks that it's free, it's given to you, that you can capitalize on if you find economics more difficult. So that is your 2.1.1 or 3.1.1, 4.1.1, and then it goes toward data response question. The first three questions, it will be 2.2.1, 2.2.2, 2.2.3, or 3.2.1, 3.2.2, 3.2.3, right? And also go to the 2.3 question, 3.3 and 4.3 data response question. This is where you're going to score easy marks. Right, let's look at this ones. Right, we have 2.1. There is give two examples of explicit costs for a firm. Right, you're going to list any two examples of explicit cost, remembering that explicit costs, those are the actual cost of a business. Remember, we have two costs, implicit and explicit. Implicit being the opportunity cost, the best alternative that you have forgone, right? And then explicit being the actual cost of the business, right? And then number two, they are asking you, why is monopolistic competition regarded as a hybrid? Hybrid is a mixture, right? I'm going to give you 4 minutes to respond, then we look at the answers. Right, grade 12, your time is up. Let's look at the responses that you have. So example of explicit cost, rent, interest rate, wages, those costs are directly involved with the production. So any other relevant one that you have, you may check in with your teacher if it is an actual cost of a business. Why is monopolistic competition regarded as a hybrid structure? The monopolistic competitor is a combination of both perfect and a monopoly. Because here they are asking for 2 marks, then this is fine. If it was 8 marks, then you must tell us that monopolistic has what characteristics that match with a perfect market. It has what characteristic that matches with a monopoly. You may mention that both their demand curve of monopolistic and monopoly, they are downward sloping. You may mention that they are both price makers. You may mention that monopolistic and perfect market, there are too many in the market. You may mention that monopolistic and perfect market, they make a normal profit in a long run. That's if you are asked for 8 marks, but then here it was only 2 marks. So you can just say that monopolistic, it has the characteristics of both a perfect market and a monopoly. Right, now we're going to a data response question. Remember our data response question, we spent 10 minutes. I'm going to give you only 8 minutes for all the data response question that we have today. So you are having 8 minutes to respond to this data response, then we look at the answers. Right, grade 12, your time is up. Let's look at the possible answers that you have. The first question was asking you to identify the type of monopoly depicted on the cartoon on the side. Let's look at that. They're talking about this Microsoft that I see there, claim they own their patents. So patents are given there. Remember, we have 2 types of monopoly, natural and the artificial monopoly. The natural one is because there's high cost of production, but then if there are patents given, it means the type of monopoly that we have there is called artificial or legal monopoly. But then if they spoke, they're speaking about the high cost. If there was something talking about high cost of development, then you may say it's a natural monopoly. But because these patents given, this licensing given, then it's an artificial monopoly. What is the nature of the product offered by monopolies? Monopolies will offer a unique product. Briefly describe the term patent as used in economics. In economics, it gives one exclusive legal rights to manufacture a product. So a patent is like a license, they give you rights to manufacture a certain product. How does the slope of monopolist demand curve differ from that of monopolistic demand curve? So you have monopolist, this one grade 12, when you see monopolist without tick, it means that one seller. When you see the tick, you know it is many seller selling differentiated product. When they say monopolist, it's same as monopoly, right? It's not a monopolistic, right? Monopolist, it is a one seller selling a unique product. Monopolistic, it is many sellers selling different product, right? So their demand curve, so your response will be like they are all downward sloping, but they differ. They are not exactly the same, right? They are not exactly the same. I will just make an example here. I'll put this one. This one I can say it's monopoly, and then this one I will say it's monopolistic. You see, the one of monopolistic, it is further away from here than this one of monopoly. There's a story behind this. They are both downward sloping. However, for monopoly, it's close to the line as compared to monopolistic. What is the difference? Is that here with monopoly, the change in prices, it is relatively inelastic, right? There's not much response. Even if prices are changing more, there's not much response. But here, if prices were to change, the response is greater. You see a large response because it is relatively elastic. That is the difference between the graph. But then when you look at your question paper, chances are you won't see if the demand curve is further away from your axis or the demand curve is closer to it. So that's why they will be giving you a guide. Maybe they will say it's a one seller, then you know it's a monopoly, right? Let's look at the responses. The slope of a monopolist demand curve is relatively inelastic. Monopoly is relatively inelastic. This is relatively inelastic. The response is not much. And compared to the monopolistic competitor, which is relatively elastic, is this one, right? This is less steep as compared to this one. So this one is closer here because the response is less, and then this one, the response is more. It's relative elastic. Remember, elastic, it means that consumers are responding much. 2.2.5, why do state-owned monopolists in South Africa find it difficult to make economic profit? Recently, they are speaking of selling the post office, privatizing the post office because it needs to be built out. They are owing so much. We're looking at day 0 at the end of October to see what will be the final decision that is made. We've seen that SAA was being bailed out so many times. It was struggling. You see that Eskom is being bailed out so many times as well by the government. What is the struggle? Why are they finding it difficult to make economic profit? Remember, a monopoly should be able to make economic profit in a short run and a long run. But you find that our state-owned monopolies that are owned by the government, they find it very difficult to make profit. What is the problem? Let's look at certain responses that we have here. Some state-owned monopolies in South Africa have a history of corruption and incompetence, which compromise their ability to make profits. Once there is corruption, incompetency, there's nepotism, there won't be profit. Due to huge maintenance costs, revenue is not sufficient to cover all the expenses. Sometimes there's non-payment of municipality. It reduces the state-owned enterprises money, the revenue, it decreases. Right. Regulation bodies such as NERSA limit high prices increases that reduce the revenue. For example, Eskom, before they increase their prices, they need to consult with NERSA. Then they may limit them from increasing prices. Then that will reduce their revenue. Over-reliance on bailouts. They rely too much on the government to assist them. They bail them out, leading to inefficiency in management decision processes. So this will lead them to not making proper decisions because they know even if they are failing, the government will bail them out. So these are some of the reasons that we may have state-owned enterprises not making economic profit. Some state-owned enterprises provide essential goods and services such as water, which is difficult for them to charge very high prices to cover their cost. Considering that we are on a developing countries where the standard of living is not exactly the same. There are people who do not have the money to pay for that. Right, let's move to the next data respond question. You are going to have 8 minutes again to respond to this data respond question. Then we look at the answers. You're going to read the information there, and then you answer the question that follows. You are given 8 minutes to do that. Then you look at your answers. Again, before you start writing grade 12, remember your easy target is this, where you need to get 4 out of 10. You may start writing. Right, grade 12, let's look at the answers that we have. For 2.3.1, name one type of inefficiencies that result from market failure. You have productive and allocative inefficiencies. Productive, also known as a technical. So if you wrote productive and technical, you're going to give yourself only 1 mark because productive is also known as technical. Give one redress policy. Way to redress, meaning to assist those who were previously disadvantaged. Name one redress policy that government used to redistribute income. You have your BEE, affirmative action, land restitution, land redistribution, minimum wage, and then you may have, if you've written your payee and whatsoever, you may be correct. You can just confirm your answers if you feel like it is correct. And number 3, briefly describe the term merit goods. These are the goods that are undersupplied by your private sector. Then the government comes in. We're talking of education, for example, healthcare, but let's describe it. Merit goods are goods that are beneficial to the society, where individuals should consume them irrespective of their income, right? So those goods are beneficial to the society. Your education, healthcare, those goods are beneficial, and individuals should be able to get them even though they are having low income or they don't have income at all. That's why the government comes in when the private sector or the market fails to supply them. Why does a negative externality result in overproduction of goods and services? Right, so negative externality, we're talking about those external costs that are there. So when we are producing something with a negative externality, for example, producing of cigarettes, it can be overproduced if the consumers are unaware of the external cost or they do not care of the external cost. They will overproduce it. Then the government should come in and charge tax on the demerit goods, which we call the sin tax. Then they will supply a bit better. Remember, the market, they tend to do what? Undersupply merit goods and oversupply demerit goods. Demerit goods that brings what? The negative externality. So the question is asking, why does a negative externality result in overproduction of goods? The external or third-party cost is not included in the market price, thus lowering the cost, which allows producers to produce more than they should. Because they are not thinking of the external cost, then they tend to produce more until the government comes in and charge taxes. Then the production will decrease. Explain the negative consequence of minimum wage on the economy. So minimum wage is set to assist the workers, right? It is a wage that is set, or the employer must pay that wage and above. It is set above the equilibrium the equilibrium wage. So this is your equilibrium wage. So when they set a minimum wage, it must be from, let's say W for wage, it must be anything above this free market wage, right? So what is the negative impact? Some questions, they become uncomfortable because the positive one, you know that workers will be will improve their standard of living as they are getting more money. They won't be exploited in the market. It may increase their productivity. They may be more interested in now producing because they are given more money. But what is the negative impact, right? So with minimum wage, it means producers have to pay more money, right? So if they have to pay more money for workers, they may retrench some because they do not afford to pay them. So that is a negative impact. That will result in what? It results in unemployment. Right, let's look at the responses that we have here. Minimum wages will result in an increase in unemployment due to reduced demand for labor. So when the minimum wage is high, they may demand less of labor. Right, they may demand less of labor. That will result in unemployment. Let's quickly just have the minimum wage graph and we see how will this be like, right? So this is your labor market, right? You have quantity, you have wages, right? So the demand and the supplier. So you have your D and your S, the side, and then there is equilibrium point here. This we call it a free market wage, right? So wage, it's a free market wage. Then the government does what? Comes in and set a minimum wage. If the free market wage was 2,000, government comes in and set 3.5 as the minimum wage, right? So this is wage one. It's a minimum wage now. It's an acceptable wage, right? So the demand for workers, for labor, will be reduced from this. If they demanded 40, now they will only demand 20. So the demand for labor has decreased. Right, so that is what we mean. Minimum wage will result in an unemployment due to reduced demand for labor. Since wages form a large part of the cost of production, output and competitiveness is compromised. So there will be less output because there's too much money that is spent on labor. Government tax revenue is reduced through lower employment. So if people are unemployed, they can't pay to the government. They pay as you earn tax, which increase the social welfare burden of the government. Due to the lower employment, production will decrease, which lead to inflation. So due to low employment, production will decrease, then can cause what we call cost push inflation. Right, and also here, when the demand decreases, the supply will increase, and then the space here, we'll call it unemployment, as there are more people now looking for jobs that they can supply. Let's say 60 people can supply their labor, and then 20 is only demanded, meaning this space here become unemployment. Right, let's look at your 8-mark question. You have 2.4 and 2.5. 2.4 says, draw a full labeled graph to show the economic loss in economy market structure. So you don't have to explain. You draw a graph of economic loss in monopoly. And then 2.5, evaluate the impact of producer subsidies by the government on the business. What will be the impact if government is providing subsidies to the producers on the business, right? You are having 10 minutes to complete both 2.4 and 2.5, then we look at the responses. Right, let's look at your answers. For 2.4, you are drawing a fully labeled graph to show economic loss. Right, so you're going to draw your graph and then you're going to get marks for your labeling axis, right? Quantity and price, cost, revenue. You're going to get marks for putting your MC, right? You're going to get the mark for AC. The AC must be above the AR for you to show that there will be a loss. You must have a mark for MR. You must have a mark for AR. Then you must also have a mark for loss minimizing, which is where MC meet MR. At this point, there's a mark for loss minimizing, also known as profit maximization. However, now we are making loss, so it's a loss minimizing point. And then you must indicate, shade your losses, right? By shading the losses, you get 2 marks, and then correct labeling of excess, you get 1 mark, and then maximum is 8 marks, right? So maximum that you can mark is 8 marks. 2.5, evaluate the impact of producer subsidies by a government on business sector. Let's look at the responses. When government provide subsidies to businesses, this will happen. It will stimulate production and helps to keep prices low, which will improve their competitiveness. It encourages businesses to provide more merit goods and services which are set to generate positive externalities. It reduces the cost of capital investment projects, which will stimulate the growth of a related business. It will also enable businesses to earn more profit due to low cost of production. So with subsidies, it assists businesses so that they produce more, and then they will produce more merit goods. Their cost of production will be less, and then they will be producing at a lower price as well. Right. We are continuing with the question on producer subsidy. Subsidies are sometimes not allocated fairly to all businesses and compromising the survival of other business. Sometimes other businesses are not given the same subsidy, so they may not be able to compete with businesses that are provided with subsidy because their cost is less, then they may suffer. That is a negative impact. Right. Might distort market price. For example, export subsidies give an advantages over their competitors in a trade in goods and services. So it may be a problem to the competitors who are not subsidized. Sometimes it protects inefficiencies firms when there might be a need to restructure. Because they are given all the subsidies, they may be more inefficient because they don't know the real cost of production. Those are negative effects. Causes firms to become too dependent on it, and the business might struggle if the subsidy is withdrawn. So if they are too much dependent on the government subsidy, if government decides to withdraw the subsidy, it may have a problem, because sometimes government has a certain period to say they are going to subsidize a business for 3 years. After that 3 years, if government is no longer subsidizing, they may struggle, and then that will lead to them shutting down and creating problems in the economy, as people will be losing their jobs and production will also decrease. Right, we are going to question 3. Right, we have the first question 3.1.1 and 3.1.2. The first 3.1, it says give 2 examples of World Heritage Sites in South Africa. Number 2, how can tourism sector help to reduce poverty among the people in the community? 4 minutes to respond, then we look at the responses. Right, let's look at our responses, grade 12. 2 examples of World Heritage Site in South Africa. We have Mapungubwe, we have Cradle of Humankind. Number 2, how can tourism sector help to reduce poverty among the local people in the community? The local unemployed people can earn an income by supplying goods and services to tourists. Remember, tourism will allow even people from a poor society to be part of it, as we are having attractions around those areas as well. Right, so you are having 8 minutes to respond to this data respond question. Then we'll look at the possible answers. Right, Right, grade 12, so let's look at our responses. What, for first question 3.2.1, what do the two dotted lines in the graph refers to? Right, the dotted line are here and here. You see 3, you see 6. What is 3 to 6? It's a target, right? That is inflation target, 3 to 6%. During which year will the Monetary Policies Committee more likely to increase the repo rate? Let's look. Remember, repo rate is increased when inflation is too high. Let's look, it's above. So here, the inflation is above. So that is around 2060. Where inflation is above the target of 6%. Briefly describe the term headline inflation. The inflation rate that represents the cost of a basket of goods of an average South African household, which is measured by the CPI. This is also known as unadjusted CPI figure. So headline inflation is your unadjusted CPI figure. It measures the cost of a basket for consumers. Explain the influence of inflationary expectation on consumers on consumption expenditure. So if we are expecting inflation to increase, what will consumers do? If you know that prices are increasing tomorrow, what are you going to do? Right, just think about it. If you know that prices will increase and you really need this thing, you may want to buy it today because you are now panicking that the price may be too high and you may not be able to afford. Right. Under inflationary condition, consumer expect price to rise further and start to buy more goods. For example, petrol price. You know, when the price of petrol is announced that it's going to increase, you find that cars are packed there by the petrol station wanting to buy before the price increase. Labor unions wish to protect their members' income against erosion of purchasing power caused by inflation, so they may bargain for more wages. How will an increase in VAT impact the economy? VAT is our 15% VAT that we pay for the goods that we buy. So if it increases, ensure increased government revenue, which would allow government to provide more social services to benefit the communities. So it will benefit the government because there will be more revenue for the government. Lead to a decrease in government revenue due to consumers reducing their consumption. We may stop buying because of too much tax. Influence production supply negatively due to decrease in demand through higher prices. People may stop buying. That will influence the producers negatively. Impact negatively on the level of aggregate demand due to increased price. That may lead to more unemployment as people are not buying and suppliers are having a problem with low demand. They may retrench some workers. Right. Let's look at this other data response question. We read the extract and then we answer the questions that follows. 8 minutes to do that. Right, grade 12, your time is up. Let's look at your answers. Give the term used to describe tourists from another country visiting South Africa. So when we're having people from their country coming to South Africa, what do we call them? Those are inbound tourists. State one purpose of tourism can be for leisure and recreation, business and professional, studying, medical purposes, cultural purposes. Briefly describe the term indigenous knowledge. Knowledge that has a practical application for daily survival of traditional communities. The local knowledge or traditional way of doing things that are unique to a certain culture or a society. So those are the local knowledges of a certain culture or the local people that is unique from the other people. Why is marketing as a tourism policy important? Why do we do marketing, right, as tourism policy important? Right, so for any other business, you know that marketing is very important to attract more consumers. Same with tourism. So for us to have more inbound tourists so that they can come and spend money, we know the benefit of tourism, right? So we need to market tourism. Marketing will sustain demand in existing market or generate demand from new market. Marketing helps to rectify the negative image of a country. So with marketing, we may attract more people to also visit the country. How can tourism have a negative impact on the environment? One of the effects of tourism is environment. So there are more people coming in as tourism is increasing. So that can have a negative impact on the environment. The features of tourism site will be destroyed if carrying capacity of the area is exceeded. If there's more people in that tourism attraction, then we may destroy whatever that is they are offering. Destroying environmental sensitive areas will destroy both cultural and natural assets. Environmental stresses leads to a loss of wildlife species due to safari hunting. Environmental cost involves the generation of waste and pollution and unsustainable use of water. So there will be more people, then there will be more waste, there will be more pollution, and then we need to use our resources even more. Right, so we are having two questions, your 3.4, which is your middle order question, and 3.5, which is your higher order question. 3.4 says, briefly explain the benefit of tourism for the household. That is remembering information. What is the benefit of tourism to the household? And then 3.5, how will the consumer price index influence the economy? How will CPI influence the economy? Right, you have 10 minutes to complete this task. Then we look at your possible answers. Your time will begin now, grade 12s. Alright, let's look at the answers that we have. Briefly explain the benefit of tourism for the household. So here you need to think of even yourself as part of household. How will tourism benefit you? If you are living next to a tourism attraction place, you may go and offer to take pictures, be a photograph there, and then they will pay for that. As a household, you'll be gaining. You may be selling something that is unique in your community, then you'll be getting money. When it comes to people that you are living in the house, they may be working in the neighboring hotels. So those are all the benefit of household because of tourism. Spending by tourists leads to an increased income to household through direct involvement in tourism, e.g. becoming a travel agent or tour operator. Indirect involvement in tourism as an employee in trading business and the hotel industry contribute to income to the household. Most infrastructure created for tourists is also available for local people. For example, roads and electricity, they're not only going to be used by tourists, but also local people. Tourism requires a variety of skills for which education and training is needed. Schools and education institutions offer a number of travel and tourism programs to benefit the individuals. So they may get some skills as they are part of that tourism industry. Tourism allows exposure to foreign cultures, which enriches cultural and social knowledge. Initially, involvement of household in the informal sector can lead to future entrepreneur in formal sector. So by just being involved in those informal sector, it may result in future people having those formal businesses due to this tourism. It starts small and then one day it can be a business in an informal sector. Right, so question number 3.5. How will the consumer price index influence the economy? So the CPI, that is what we use to calculate inflation. That is what we use to measure the inflation. So this is a nice question because they didn't talk about it increasing or decreasing. So you can talk about the CPI increasing, how would that influence the economy? The CPI decreasing, how would that influence the economy? So you should know that if inflation is increasing, what happens to the economy? If the inflation is decreasing, what happened to the economy? Inflation influences the economy by distorting prices, and it is no longer a correct indicator of the value of goods and services. So when prices are increasing, then the purchasing power decreases, then our value of goods and services also are impacted there. Supply useful indicators of price movement, which might channel investment in a certain direction. So by looking at the CPI, remember that is giving us what? Inflation. So by looking at the CPI, we may know the movement where the economy is heading. Then it may give us a way to make a decision as well. Compare price index of different months. That helps to assess the state of the economy. So by comparing the indexes from one month to the next month, you may be able to assess where the economy is at or where it's heading. Trade union negotiate wages increases that are not in line with an increase in productivity of workers, sometimes because of the CPI, knowing that it's going to increase. Now the labor unions may now negotiate more than that, because sometimes CPI is not also accurate as well. South Africa Reserve Bank uses the CPI to apply suitable monetary policy option. So for them to know if they must increase or decrease the repo rate, they must look at the consumer price index. That will help to pursue the inflation target for 3 to 6%. The selection of goods and services in calculation of the CPI does not always represent the average household. That might influence each household differently. Remember, CPI, they are putting certain goods in a basket, so it may not represent all the household. Maybe the product that you prefer for it to be in the basket is not there, and then maybe the products that are in the basket, they do not really represent your consumption as a household. Therefore, you may say that the information is not really accurate for all South Africans. However, we still use CPI as an indication or a measure to find our inflation, to calculate our inflation. Right, grade 12, thank you very much for joining in today's class. We looked at the section B questions of your November 2020 paper 2. I wish you good luck on your paper 2 examination prelim. Thank you for joining in today's class.